Welcome back to the Season 17 Mid-Season Stadium tier list, where in this video I'm going to be covering my opinion on the DPS. As you can see, I've already ranked the tanks in the last video. And jumping straight into it, we already have a strange one to cover first, that being Ashe. I've kind of been referring to, generally throughout this list, the idea that I think that hit scans are still really strong. I don't think they're as broken as they were at the start of Stadium, where I genuinely think they ran the mode, and it practically didn't matter how good anyone else was. If you had a good hit scan and the enemy team couldn't shut them down, you basically just won for free every time. Now obviously I don't think it's quite that bad anymore, but I'd still say hitscan has a significant impact in Stadium. As I say, it's just so good at dealing with the big fat meatball tanks, it's so good for dealing with DPS that try and turn themselves into big fat meatballs to overcome their low survivability and very bursty nature towards the end of the game. But most importantly, I'm going to be honest with you, because the fact that dive is just so tough to pull off in Stadium right now and has such poor options available to it, oftentimes I don't even really think the tank has an opportunity to make a lot of space, because a lot of times the way that tanks get built, the only thing they can really do is just brawl on point, with only a couple exceptions. And because all they can do is brawl on point, they can't really play aggressively, they can't really take angles, they can't really, make space for you unless the space you want to make is the point. Which, don't get me wrong, it's nice to have the point, but, it's kind of important to get angles around the point for you to be able to even take the point in the first place. And a lot of the times, the tank just does not have the mobility available to them to actually do that for you. For that reason, as weird as it sounds, because of how slow main DPS tend to play, the main DPS and hit scans in this mode, in my opinion, typically tend to make more space than anyone else. Because even if they are slow and they can't play all too aggressively, if they get a sightline, that sightline just becomes your space. Again, hit scans are really oppressive when you can play them in positions where people can't shoot you back. Again, because there's so few options to dive you as well, and there's so many survivability options you can take to avoid dying even if they do dive you. So for that reason, obviously if I think hit scan's good, you might expect that I'd put Ashe relatively high, especially considering she seems to be an insanely popular character right now. But I'm going to be real with you. I think Ashe is underwhelming. Now she could be worse, but I think I'm putting her low C. Listen, hit scans are very good in this mode. The problem is that Ashe is the worst hit scan. Now, don't get me wrong, most hit scans are in the A to S area, so you might be thinking that the worst hit scan might just put you at a B. But it's to the point where there's very few situations where I'd ever want to pick Ashe if there's another option available. Let me put it this way, if Ashe overall was technically better than she is right now, but she also literally had 0 strengths over Cass and Soldier, I would actually rank her even lower, because there would be literally no reason to pick her over Cass or Soldier. So even if that theoretical version of Ashe had more power in one character, if she had no unique utility with that power, then I would give her just F tier. That being said, Ashe as she currently is in Stadium isn't completely useless. I just think the situations in which she beats out the competition are relatively niche. They aren't completely irrelevant. If they were, I would be much harsher with my ranking. They do sometimes matter, but I do think it's underwhelming. Essentially, I'm going to talk assuming this is a pretty standard weapon power Ashe kind of build, or maybe a survivability Ashe build. I'm not being very specific here, because honestly, there aren't that many particularly specific Ashe builds out there anyway. She's got a relatively basic kit in Stadium, so she doesn't have all that many fancy different things you can try. But yeah, if you're just going weapon power Ashe and playing Ashe normally, then I essentially think she is usually worse than the other hit scans, because of the fact the other hit scans have better sustained damage, even though Ashe gets better burst. Now, in the normal game, obviously burst is more valuable than sustain. This is actually a big reason why Soldier is basically never good at top-level games. It's not even because Soldier actually really is that bad of a character. Sprint is actually a pretty useful ability to have. There's no one else who can really reposition that quickly at literally no cost to themselves without having to use any cooldowns. Biotic Field is actually pretty good at keeping you alive now, and on top of that, the actual DPS numbers of Soldier are actually really, really high. You'd think he might be a good character. But, at least in the base game, Soldier's really underwhelming because in high skill level lobbies, people struggle to kill on Soldier even if they hit their shots, because people are just smart enough to always play near cover and always be able to dive to cover before you can finish the kill. You have to use burst damage to catch people off guard, but how do you do that when you're playing a character with no burst? The best burst you have is Helix Rocket, which, besides being mediocre, is also only really effective at close range because it's such a slow travelling projectile they can easily dodge from a distance. For that reason, Soldier's underwhelming in the base game, but of course I think it's the opposite in Stadium. I think while Burst isn't irrelevant in Stadium, I do think that Sustain is generally more useful because time to kill is just longer in Stadium most of the time, and fights do drag on for a very, very long time. Not to mention, if you're dealing constant sustained damage, you're farming a lot of credits. Compared to Soldier, while Ashe is better in the base game, in Stadium, Ashe has a really long reload and a relatively slow fire rate. As a result, again, she's good at burst, but she's not really great at that sustained damage. Now again, this doesn't mean that Ashe is bad versus tanks in long fights. She's still good, she's still a hit scan. She's just not as good as the others. All this being said, I might be making it sound like I think burst is irrelevant in Stadium, and I think that's far from true. It has its uses. In fact, one of its uses is the only reason why Ashe is even this high on the list. That being the fact that I do think she has one significant advantage no other hitscan has, and that is if it's a hitscan v hitscan duel and you're Ashe, you usually have the upper hand. In most situations, unless they're fighting you at point blank range, you as Ashe are going to have a better shot at killing a Cass or a Soldier if you're shooting each other from a distance. And that is actually quite relevant, because basically everyone else in the game, if they want to deal with a hitscan, have to commit to a dive, and I've already expressed how difficult that is in the current state of Stadium. You just don't have a lot of tools to do so, and it requires a lot of team play and coordination that, let's be real, you don't get in Stadium. And anytime you don't get the team play you need to make up for it with insane mechanical skill that most of you don't have, me included. So it is nice to be able to just play a character that can kill the other hit scans by just beating them at their own game, just shooting them. All this being said though, this might sound a bit weird. This whole time I've been talking about like base Ashe, just weapon power I guess. I haven't really been talking about the way that people tend to play Ashe. Because if you haven't played any Stadium and you've been living under a rock, when I've been playing my games of Stadium, I don't know what you guys have been experiencing, but literally there's like an Ashe in every lobby and every single Ashe is playing the same build. And that is Dynamite AP Ashe, where you try and farm burn damage as much as possible to farm credits, and you rely on ability damage rather than weapon damage. I'm gonna be real with you. I think that AP Ashe is the biggest trap in the entire game. I cannot believe that it seems like it's the most popular DPS build I have seen on the entire ladder, considering that you are cosmetic as all hell when you play this build. I don't really want to dog on you if you're like not the kind of person who plays Ashe and you're just having fun and you're just like, okay, you know what, I haven't played Ashe yet, let me try Ashe and let me try a build that doesn't require a lot of aim because I'm not really an Ashe player. Sure, I've not got the best aim either, I get it. But if you're actually trying in your games and you're playing AP Ashe, I really gotta ask, what the hell are you doing? AP Ashe has multiple glaring flaws. For one, you're not really that effective from a distance anymore because you're so reliant on abilities that are only really consistent at close range. But that might be okay if you had the mobility to back that up. But you're Ashe. You're a sniper. You're still working with the base kit of a sniper, even if you're taking these extra powers that make you more powerful up close. You're just choosing to be an up-close threat on a character that's not built to fight people up close, which is kind of questionable already. But to be honest, that's kind of small potatoes compared to the big picture concerns. Because you're playing a character that has increased threat at close range, but has terrible mobility and is built to snipe, you don't really have the ability to make space, like, at all. If you went into weapon power, you could use your long-range pressure to massively clear out long sight lines, but you can't do that anymore, because your weapon deals like no damage. And if you want to actually deal damage, you've got to get close. But if you get close, you're going to be a sitting duck, and on top of that, man, you've got to get really close, and the enemies have to be dumb enough to not see it coming and not run out of the way. And then even when it happens, like, the one way you make this work is you take the triple dynamite power, and you do the combo where you throw the dynamite at someone, you blow it up, and then before they can even react, you immediately pop the coach gun and use the coach gun to detonate all three of the mini dynamites immediately, rather than having them sit on the ground and giving the enemies time to run out of it. If you do that, in fairness, that is usually enough damage to like insta-kill an entire tank if they don't get massive heals while they're burning to death. That is huge. But also, it requires you to blow all your cooldowns, it only works at point blank range, and after you've blown all your cooldowns, you now have no survivability tools, no mobility tools, and no way to really engage with the fight until your cooldowns come back. Hell, you can't even take high ground, because you just use your coach gun. So yeah, I think you get the point. I think AP Ashe is a complete dumpster fire. I think it's an absolute throw pick, and I don't understand why everyone's playing it. The only thing I can really give it is, in fairness, maybe it might seem like I'm being hypocritical here, considering there are going to be some points later in the list where I'm going to bring up a character character who can stat farm, and I'm going to talk about that as a good thing. You know, when you have characters like Moira, who often get really big damage and healing numbers, but it doesn't really correlate to a lot of lives saved or deaths caused. A lot of the times, it's really just cosmetic. It's not really having a large impact on the game. That's obviously bad in the base game, but in Stadium, unfortunately, stat padding is actually kind of important. Even if you're getting stats that aren't really all that relevant to securing kills and making space, at the very least, you're making money, and that money can be important in the late game. So there's going to be some characters like Moira, where I'm actually going to say the fact that they stat pad, unfortunately in Stadium, is actually an upside for them, not a downside. But here with AP Ashe, I actually say the fact that AP Ashe stat farms like crazy is actually a really bad sign. And the reason I'm going to say that is that most characters who can stat farm in the early game to get loads of credits, even if they're not doing that much, then use those credits to convert into an actual strategy that will win in the late game. I feel like this is the case for Moira and Mercy. Meanwhile, you have Ashe, and I think if you play AP Ashe, while you do get to farm a ton of credits if you just blow up tank on repeat, you also get no kills, make no space, demand resources from your team, and then ultimately, what do you do with all the money you got? You get more ability power so you can farm even more money, but do you get anything that really helps you be more independent? Maybe, but probably not significantly. Do you get anything that allows you to make more space? No, you don't really have the option to without completely pivoting your build to something completely different. Do you have the option to get some kind of new ability that can fix your kit? No. You can only really use your money to do more of what you're already doing, but what you're already doing is good for nothing except making money. It doesn't actually give you a late game strategy to win the game. For all those reasons, I gotta tell you, I really do think that AP Ashe is a complete crutch. And I don't know why so many of you guys are playing it. Just boring old weapon power Ashe is better in my opinion. I'm even saying that as someone who doesn't have the best aim. I have had more success doing weapon power Ashe than AP Ashe. I have never really been convinced by the power of AP Ashe, and I have been convinced by the simple power of hitting shots on weapon power Ashe, even when I'm not that good at hitting shots. I'm telling you, even if you think you're not the best shot, if you want to play Ashe in Stadium and you don't want to throw, please stop picking AP Ashe, even if you think your aim is bad. If your aim is even existent, I'm sure you'll do more with weapon power Ashe. At least then you can threaten a kill from long range, and for that reason you can actually make some space, even if you don't hit every shot. Next up, we got Cassidy, who is a bit of a weird one, but I think I'm going to put him at S-. Cassidy is pretty damn good, but not really for particularly exciting reasons. He is just a hit scan, and arguably the most durable and hard to kill hit scan, and that's a big point in his favour. For that reason, he reaches S-. Cass, in my mind, gets a lot of points because of the fact that I don't think he struggles with the same consistency issues that almost every other DPS in the game does. He's really good at shutting other people down when DPS are usually the people getting shut down themselves, not the people who are able to shut others down. So already, he's kind of got a leg up over a lot of other DPS. On top of that, he's got the ability to farm tank very, very safely, which to be fair, most hit scans do, but usually they pay for that ability to farm tank safely with the fact that they are vulnerable to being dove. However, Cass literally exists as like an anti-dive pick. You have flashbang, you have the damage resistance on roll, you have the extra damage up close, especially with Fan the Hammer, you absolutely can deal with getting dove on Cass, way better than you could on any other hit scan. And so I wouldn't say you're particularly explosive on Cass. It's not like you show up and everyone just dies immediately, but you're just there, and you're always causing a problem for the enemies, and yet you're almost impossible to remove from the equation. No matter how hard they try, they're almost always going to find that unless they can perform a very coordinated and synchronized dive, a lot of the times, the Cass is just not going to be a viable target to kill. And that's going to be a real problem, because the Cass being alive is going to make basically anyone else, other than the tank on the front line, completely unviable to dive either. You go for Anna? Oh, flashbanged. You go for Mercy? Oh, dinked. Cass existing anywhere near his team just makes it so you're practically not allowed to do anything, except try and brute force your way to killing him first, even if he gets pocket. Or you're just forced to play the boring game of spamming down main and trying to kill the tank, and playing it the slow way. So Cass is a real pain to deal with when they're on the enemy team. It's weird though, because I haven't seen a lot of Cass in Stadium at all, but I think it really says something that every Cass I have seen has been dominating and taking over the entire lobby. Even I, someone who is not very confident on Cass, have had a lot more success on Cass than I have some other DPS that, frankly, I think I'm a lot better at. Because I just think Cass is very reliable and strong in Stadium. I know it's boring, but just having a hit scan at all in Stadium is a huge deal, and the way you lose your hit scan is them getting dove, and he just doesn't die. He doesn't get dove. He kills people who dive him. He gets free kills off of it. So, I'm gonna say, I really do think that Cass is currently underrated in Stadium, and still a really high-tier pick. In fairness, I think back in Season 16, he was literally the best character in the entire game, and I wouldn't go that far anymore. But man, he really didn't fall very far to say before I think he was through the roof OP. Next up is Freja. And Freja is a weird one. But I'm going to put her pretty high. At S-. Just barely above Cass. I'm not going to lie, catch me on a different day and I might swap the order. I think between Cass and Freja it is tight as hell. But for now, I'm going to trust in Freja and put her just above Cass, but I'm so torn on those two, they're so close. So yes, Freja is very good, but I don't want to get too carried away. I still think D.Va is better than Freja, which is probably a bit shocking to some of you, but I really think it's true. I think in general, the way that people talk about Freja has been a little bit off. I'm not saying that Freja isn't strong, I mean, I just put her in S-. But I also think that people go off the rails. They say, well, Freya's just a super high-skilled character. If you think she's bad, that's just because you're bad at the game and you don't understand Freja, and she's too hard for you. Try hitting some shots. You don't understand Freya's the most broken character ever added to the game. You don't understand, oh, you just can't hit shots. You're just not good enough. I'm not going to lie, I kind of don't buy it. In fact, I never really bought it. I always thought Freja was good, but I didn't really know how good I wanted to say she was. Certainly a solid pick, but I'm going to be real with you. I feel like people talk about Freja because of her damage a lot of the time, especially if you hit all your shots. But if you're talking about a main DPS who does stupid damage if you hit all your shots and has loads of mobility, aren't we talking about Sojourn? Like, Sojourn is way better than Freja in that respect. She does way more damage. She's honestly, I would say, more mobile, especially if you take the double thrusters perk, where you get 2 slides. That is insane in terms of mobility for a main DPS. Not to mention, I would say that Sojourn has a significant advantage in the Sojourn v Freja matchup. If we're talking main DPS that do stupid amounts of damage but still get to be mobile, I feel like Sojourn wins that war, not Freja. And I've always felt that way, to be honest. That doesn't mean Freya's a bad character, it just means, like, if we're talking about Freja as this, you don't understand, she's super high skill, but if you hit all your shots, she does so much damage, and oh my god, you can still be mobile while doing all this stupid damage. I don't know, I feel like you should just pick Sojourn. I don't think that, like, you know, Freya's better than that. But obviously this is Stadium, and in Stadium we don't have Sojourn yet, so that gives Freja some points already. However, the reason I'm bringing this up is because it brings me to my next point, which I think is more important. I feel like the longer I played Freja, I figured something out. You see, I was really expecting to not be very good at Freja. And I'm going to be real with you, obviously I'm not the best Freja ever, but I've actually had some decent success with Freja. I actually couldn't really figure out how, though. I felt like this should be a character I was bad at, but I seem to succeed at them a lot. The main way that I thought I would probably be good at her is if I felt her mobility was very, very powerful, because I'm very good with mobile characters. But to be honest, I don't think her mobility is very powerful. Well, at least not in the traditional sense. It doesn't get you places faster, and it doesn't allow you to jump in and out very reliably. And so for a bit, I couldn't quite put my finger on what is good about Freja. It feels like there's something that's good about this character that other people have been saying. And eventually I realised it was something that seems so basic I kind of overlooked it, but is actually more unique than I gave it credit for. That being the fact that so much of her mobility is vertical. I know this might sound really obvious to some of you, but I guess I just brush this off as, yeah, okay, so you use that to get high ground, or you use that to stall in the air to try and, like, avoid getting dove. Which, like, don't get me wrong, you do that, but there's one last thing I hadn't considered that really helps flesh this out and explain to me why Freya's clicking with me a little, even if only a little, and I'm having some decent success on her, and why I feel like a lot of people are miscommunicating what's good about Freja. What's good about Freja isn't really her damage output, even though it can be very high if you hit all your shots and you're very good at her. It's not really her mobility in terms of her ability to get places and get in and out quick, even though she can do a bit of that depending on how you ration your cooldowns. It's not even really that she's unkillable, although the way her mobility works, especially with the on-command slowdown, you can mix up your movement to such an insane degree that it's almost impossible to hit her with anything that isn't hit scan. But no, the real thing about Freja that makes her so strong is that most main DPS characters like her have to set up on an angle, and people have to walk into that angle for you to get the kill. And for that reason, you often can only really shoot tank, and if you want to have a chance to shoot a DPS or a support, you need to take a risky flank that could very easily go badly, and often you're hard committing to it whether you like it or not. Now you might expect that what I'm about to say is, well, you can use your mobility to dip in and out and you don't really have to commit, but like I said, that's what I thought Freja was going to be like at first, but honestly, you still have to commit pretty hard on Freja. Your mobility, at least horizontally, is not very good. Oftentimes you don't have the ability to dip out without consequences. No, the actual unique value of Freja is the fact that you have so much vertical mobility with updraft that you can often completely look over cover and catch people in places where any normal character wouldn't be able to see them without taking an extremely greedy and risky flank. Meanwhile, Freja can just shoot herself to the skybox, camp up there where no one can reach her, and then land a shot on someone who's behind multiple sets of cover, but you're just so high up in the air that all their cover is invalidated. This allows you to do what flankers do, where they have to go deep to deal with the backline, without having to actually accept all the risk associated with that. In fact, you're safer than ever. Again, you're in the skybox. Unless you're dealing with a hit scan, no one is killing you up there. But you're sure as hell still killing them, and where are they supposed to hide? All the cover on the map's just been invalidated. Unless they can get indoors quickly, and oftentimes they won't have the mobility to do so fast enough, they don't really have a way to avoid the damage you're putting out. That's what's good about Freja, is her ability to completely invalidate cover by using updraft. Why am I bringing all this up? Well, it's not just for the base game, it's also for Stadium. I think in Stadium, ironically enough, especially with how superpowered the other hit scans can become, I don't even think Freya's that good for damage. Don't get me wrong, she's very good for farming tank, but you don't really want that to be your only strategy. You want that to be your fallback when you have nothing better to do. Although I will say, my god does it suck playing tank versus Freja in this mode, because you actually just can't interact with her. She's in the skybox all game, and the only way that she can get free value without risk is just pumping arrows into you. So of course she does that all game. So that sucks. That being said, if you actually want to win your games though on Freja, a lot of the time, you're going to want to look for opportunities to aim at the backline and use your updraft to invalidate cover so you can shoot things other than the tank. I just brought that up because being able to farm the tank is a nice fallback option that allows you to at least make money in situations where you can't easily have impact because of the map or whatever else may be stopping you. In fact, even though you might consider it a small detail, I feel like I have to bring up the fact I would consider Freja to be, funnily enough, the best counter in Stadium to Zenyatta. Which is weird, because Zenyatta is quite literally intentionally designed to be a quote-unquote overpowered character, but the one thing that keeps him in check is that he's got literally no tools to survive a dive, at least in the base game. But Stadium has made him so stupidly tanky that he's basically undivable if you build him right. And as a result, I don't think characters like Genji are the pick to deal with someone like a Zenyatta. I think they've got way too many tools to make someone like a Genji's life hell for trying to dive them. Meanwhile, if you play Freja, you can just shoot up to the skybox, invalidate all the Zen's cover, shoot them from a mile away. The Zen can't shoot you because they've got slow-traveling orbs that are never going to reach you in time. You're going to have all the time in the world to dodge every shot. Meanwhile, he gets barely any time to dodge your explosive shots, and he can't hide anywhere, and he has no mobility. Dink dink, and he's dead. And don't get me wrong, is it hard to dink dink from that distance on very short notice? Yes, but it becomes a lot easier when you're dealing with Zenyatta, who has one of the biggest head hitboxes in the game. Considering how high a skill ceiling can get as well, really the only thing keeping Freja from the S+ tier is the fact that I still think the best thing to deal with Freja is other hit scans. And yeah, that is a big issue. Especially considering I would say in Stadium, it's often smarter to dive the hit scans first rather than the supports first, because supports are so strong and durable and tanky in this mode that honestly, you're literally never killing them if you try to focus supports first. Whereas if you try to focus the hit scan first, that takes a lot of pressure off of you the next time you go and kill a support. So oftentimes that's the easiest place to start, especially because the hit scans are usually way easier targets to kill. But for all those reasons, Freja can have a bit of trouble. I mean, hit scans are strong in this mode, hit scans are the main thing that counter you, and you don't really have a good way of dealing with them. They're the only people who can actually destroy you if you just fly up to the skybox. And it is a little rough that the number one target in most situations that you want to kill first, the hit scan, is the kind of target that's probably going to kill you before you get a chance to kill them if you run into them when you're playing Freja at least. Again, I'm not making the case that Freja is bad. You can see where she is on the list. But I'm just explaining why I'm not going to go on the crazy hype train of, oh my god, Freya's crazy, oh my god, guys, you don't understand, oh my god, delete Freja from the game, she's too much, she's too OP, she's too OP! I don't think it's really that bad. Next up, oh boy, we got Genji, who I'm a little depressed to put in B, considering that I did believe in the potential of Genji early in Season 16. And that's because of the fact that, well, How do you deal with all these hit scans that are taking over? You dive them. Now, is it easy to dive them? Hell no! But, like, what's the alternative? Just accept loss? Don't get me wrong, it sucks that your job is just factually way harder when you decide you want to play Genji rather than Cass, and now you have to dive this Cass. It sucks that Cass gets to put in way less effort and get way more reward, but at the end of the day, if you're being put in the situation where you're not really a Cass player, and you go against someone who's on Cass, and you need to deal with them, you kinda gotta be a good Genji, or at least someone who can dive, but Genji's like the best option in the DPS for a dive DPS, at least seemingly at first. He's the hardest dive DPS, I guess is the better way to phrase it. The one who goes the most all-in on being dive, the thing that's supposed to counter hit scans. But as you can imagine by the fact he's in a pretty middling spot, I don't know how much I believe in him anymore. That's not necessarily to say he's bad, I mean he's still in B. But I do think that Genji has fallen off a little bit. And that is partially because of the way the game has been rebalanced, especially moving away from weapon power and all that, making that a lot weaker. While that helps him deal with hit scans because they're less of a threat, it also means he's kind of a little bit less important, although dealing with hit scans is still important. But also it means that survivability items kind of received an indirect buff. And that's kind of where the issues come in. I think due to the fact that survivability items got better, we entered a sort of era where flex DPS are much more useful when they can go where they need to be and they can be a stubborn threat. It doesn't really matter how fast they kill as long as they can just be this Lego brick that people keep stepping on. You're really, really hard to get rid of, you're really, really hard to kill and punish, and you just cause problems for the enemies. That's really what you want to be doing. And don't get me wrong, can Genji do that? Yeah, especially if you play him well, but like, he's clearly a lot more of a glass cannon than someone like Reaper, and I think that really holds him back. I feel like he rarely has the ability to stay in the fight as long as he really needs to in Stadium to have big impact. That being said, you obviously can't deny that Genji is an extremely high skill ceiling character, and there are always going to be some people who are going crazy on Genji and pushing him to his limits, and I'm definitely not going to discount the value they can bring on the character. If you know what you're doing on Genji, and you pull him off well, I do think nothing will reward you more in this game than performing a good dive on Genji. I just think the difficulty of doing that is insanely through the roof, and on top of that, sometimes it's not even a skill issue. Like, don't get me wrong, obviously skill will always make it more consistent, always make it more easy for you to pull this off. But I do think there are just some slim situations where you can just have a situation where it's like, this is not even a skill issue. You can do a good dive on Genji and still do nothing because you're on a really, really bad map for it, or because you've got a really, really bad comp to support your dives. And those are kind of factors outside of your control. Even though I keep hammering home the idea that dive has very poor tools in Stadium, I still think it is worthwhile trying to dive people in Stadium. I just think, given the current state of Stadium, as I say, consistency is key, and I feel like Genji is the face of inconsistent here. So I'm going to make this one relatively quick and just say, I see the potential in Genji, but I think unless you're a god Genji, you should just play Reaper. You will get the same results with way more consistency and way less effort. Next up is Junkrat. Listen, I'm going to be real with you. If I'm a cold, logical person, I should probably just put this guy in C. But I'm going to just barely give him a B. And I might regret this. I don't know. Okay, listen. I really want to believe in Junkrat. It seems most people think Junkrat's bad in Stadium. And they might be right. Okay, hear me out. I'm actually not much of a Junkrat enjoyer in the base game. I say that, he's grown on me a lot recently, but he was actually one of the last characters I learned to play, which I know that probably sounds ridiculous considering how easy he is considered to be by the average player. But don't get me wrong, Junkrat is easy at first, but he's one of those weird characters where like he's really easy in low to medium skill levels, but then beyond that he actually gets really, really hard. And so, because of the fact I never really played Junkrat when I was new to the game, when it would have been easy to play Junkrat, I actually kind of struggled to pick him up, because by the time I tried picking him up, I was at the skill level where it actually becomes difficult to play Junkrat and you actually have to know what the hell you're doing. So I'll admit, it took me a while to get a grasp on Junkrat, especially because I've always done the best on characters who can live practically forever when you play them smart. And Junkrat is obviously like the complete opposite of that. Like, I don't know for sure, but I would be pretty confident in guessing that the character with the most deaths per 10 minute in the entire history of Overwatch has got to be Junkrat. Anyway, enough about my history with Junkrat. Basically, though, I just think that Junkrat's set of stadium powers and items is the coolest stadium kit in all of Stadium. Especially Hot Boom. I know it's a simple power, just getting a second concussion mine when you land to double rocket jump, but I'm telling you, man, Hot Boom might be my favorite addition in all of Stadium. I like it more than any other item or power. I think Hot Boom is just like peak Stadium gameplay. So yeah, I'll admit, I have a massive soft spot for Junkrat in this mode. I think he is so fun. He has got some of the best build diversity and inter-build synergy out there. There is so many things you can do with him. I told you, I have like 6 builds on Junkrat going right now, of varying levels of viability and memeability. I absolutely love this character. And I'm going to be real with you. Well, obviously, I'm telling you all this because I want to explain why I like them, and I want to explain why I'm worried I might be a little biased when I put this guy just barely in B. I'm still putting them in B, not just because I'm like, well, I like them, so I'm going to put them in B even though they belong in C. I'm doing it because it makes me want to believe in him. And what I mean by that is, I genuinely am going to make the argument, I think that Junkrat is one of the highest skill ceiling DPS in Stadium. And I know that sounds like a joke, but I'm telling you, play some Junkrat in Stadium and see how easy you think it is. You might get some games where you're actually allowed to play the brain-dead Junkrat style where you just spam down main, and sure, those games are going to be easy. But I don't think that's going to be most of your games on Junkrat. I think when you play Junkrat in Stadium, you're going to have a lot of games where the only way you can get value is to go for some of the riskiest, craziest dives possible, where you have to concussion mine deep into their backline and get the kill quick and get the hell out of there. And that requires some insane movement, precision, fast thinking, and awareness. I genuinely think that Stadium Junkrat takes way more skill than Junkrat does in the normal game, and as a result has a way higher skill ceiling. A skill ceiling I'm not going to pretend I've reached. I have mixed results with Junkrat. When I pop off like crazy. But I have games on Junkrat as well where I literally feel like my team might be better off if I'm not even in the lobby. Especially when you combine everything I've just been talking about with Zip Grease, the item he has that makes it so that next time he detonates a concussion mine, he gets a few seconds of his shots going at triple speed. That item makes it so that Junkrat is a pseudo hit scan, which is insane to witness. Nothing feels better in this game than flying through the sky with Hot Boom, dropping bombs everywhere with the Total Mayhem passive, and then mid-air just landing a bank shot at light speed that kills someone and just deletes their entire HP pool. Just like, boom, gone. And again, I'm not hitting consistent shots with this because I'm not a Junkrat one trick, but I'm just imagining, damn, if I was good at Junkrat, the power in my hands right now. Especially considering a lot of Junkrat's powers and items I feel cover his greatest weaknesses and make him much, much more versatile than he would be otherwise. If I'm making all these arguments, why not put him higher? Why the bottom of B? Why not to put him at A? Maybe even S-? Well, here's the big issue. And this is the one that's kind of tough to overcome and hard for me to really make an argument against. You can overcome a lot of Junkrat's weaknesses with a lot of skill and adaptability and understanding how to change your build to adapt to changing circumstances, but like, there is one issue you're going to keep running into that you can remedy with items, but you can never really fix. Junkrat is already a glass cannon in the base game, and Stadium makes that 100 times worse. Junkrat just explodes for trying to exist anywhere within 50 meters of the fight. You just literally cannot exist. And the worst part is, the main method of mobility and aggression you have launches you into the sky and makes you really obvious to every hit scan in the entire area. And oftentimes it only takes 2 or 3 shots to kill you from full HP. So you have a lot of situations on Junkrat where you try to roll out and before you even make it 3 steps out of spawn, you're already dead. And don't get me wrong, there's an aspect of skill issue there, but sometimes you just hit moments where it's like, okay, you can say skill issue, but the way that I don't die is that I just sit here and do nothing. If I mine in, I die. If I just stand down main, I don't die immediately, but eventually I die. If I try to play an off angle, that might work if no one finds me, but that's kind of going to be luck-based, and if someone catches me while I'm trying to sneak around, unless I can get out real quick, which sometimes I'll be able to, sometimes I won't, depends on the map geometry, I'm going to die. You see the issue? Like, you've got options that are better than just guess I'll give up or guess I'll die. But, like, even the best option there is, like, take a dice roll and hope no one finds you as you try to sneak around the side. For this reason, I actually think it's way smarter on Junkrat to basically hard focus survivability rather than to really invest much in weapon power or ability power. Obviously it's still nice to get some on the side, but I don't really think you should focus it. You already do a lot of damage as Junkrat, your main issue is just trying to live for 3 seconds. But even with those adjustments in mind, they often buy you time, but if you're in a situation where you're taking a lot of fire because you're just a very obvious and easy to shoot target, it only really does just that, buy you time. It doesn't actually stop you from dying, it just makes you die a second later. That is, unless you completely shift playstyle, but again, any playstyle you can shift to is either going to be a very luck-based one, or one that requires you to be extremely inactive and contribute very little to the team for the sake of not dying on repeat. For all those reasons, this is the highest I can put him, but I'm telling you, I'm convinced you can overcome at least the vast majority of his downsides if you just got good enough at him. I think his skill ceiling is through the roof. Oh boy, next up is an interesting one. Mei. Okay. I'm going to be real with you here. When I initially made this list in Season 16, Mei was my bottom pick. And at the time, I kind of felt weird about it. I thought, I don't know, I didn't think Mei was a particularly good character. But like, does she really belong at the bottom of the list? There's got to be someone worse than Mei. But I kept looking through the list and just going, nah, there's no one I really want to put below Mei. It just feels weird to put Mei last. Is she really that bad? At the time, I wasn't really sure, but you know what, time has passed, and now we're in a new season as well, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel like I should never have even hesitated. I think that Mei is not only very clearly the worst DPS in Stadium right now, I think she's actually the worst character in Stadium right now, as our only D tier for the list. That probably seems harsh, but let me explain. First of all, actually, let's start with me talking about where Mei is good. Because there are some situations where I think that Mei is invaluable and irreplaceable. It's just, they are very niche. If it was just that Mei had no good situations to be used, I would just have the balls to say she's F tier. I would literally have no one in D and E and just go straight to F. But at the end of the day, there are situations where I think you want a Mei. But they're very narrow. I think you really want a Mei if you've got either a Genji or a Reaper as your other DPS, with a Junker Queen or a Diva as your tank. In that situation, the ability for the Mei to hold space while the tank and the dive DPS go in and eat the backline alive is really important. In those contexts, Mei is extremely pivotal to the team comp even functioning, and is extremely oppressive to deal with. But it's only with all the perfect support that Mei becomes a monster. It's only in her dream team compositions where she gets the exact team she wants. The second you actually just have to play Mei in normal games, where, I don't know, you have Mei Ashe, and your tank's like a Reinhardt or something, suddenly your character starts to feel a lot worse. First of all, in the fact that I would argue that Mei has some of the worst build diversity in the entirety of Stadium. I know that technically there's a lot of things you can try, but it feels like almost the entirety of her kit is just based around Blizzard. And sure, there's a lot of mini Blizzard synergies to try, but I'm going to be real with you, I don't even think that many of them are very good. I think most of them are pretty underwhelming, and yet it's the only thing you can build around, unless you just want to do a generic Weapon Power Mei build. To be fair, I do think Weapon Power Mei is the correct way to play her, but I don't blame people for just playing AP Mei, because Weapon Power Mei is boring. AP Mei may be the same old every time, but at least it's something a little bit more interesting. No, but seriously, a more serious concern with Mei, though, is the fact that, yes, she's very good at holding space, but I just think that's the only thing she's good at. And what's even worse, unfortunately, is that when I play Mei, I run into this issue a lot. I will often sacrifice my KD or sacrifice stats for the sake of holding positions that are really important for my teammates. Like, for example, say I do have the team comp I want. I have a Diva Genji, and they go in and they're diving backline, and they leave me on point. I want to hold my position, but then I start getting pressured. And ideally, if I'm playing for my life, I should just back the hell up. However, my Diva and my Genji will not survive if I back up. They need to be able to retreat to me, otherwise they will not make it out of there alive. So there may be situations where I'm like, okay, if I'm just playing for my life, I ditch here. But because I know, as the linchpin that holds space in this team while everyone else goes and makes space, I need to hold this position so that everyone who's going in deep still have a position to retreat to after they're done diving. There's a chance that I die for doing this, but I need to do it for my team. This is a pretty normal thing that happens, in my experience, quite a lot on Mei, in the base game and in Stadium. But the thing is, in the base game, if you don't really get the most stuff on the scoreboard, because a lot of the times you're sacrificing your own well-being to hold space for the team, while it sucks that it doesn't give you like a pat on the head, hey, look how good you did, you still win the game off of it. You get rewarded, just in a more abstract way. Then the Stadium, though, where you need to make money by doing things. And the game doesn't count holding space as doing things and making you money. And so a lot of the times, I find that when I'm playing Mei in Stadium, I either have to completely screw over my entire team and not do my job to stat farm and make money, or I do my job and help my team, but make no money and then get flamed when I have no cash, and everyone's asking why I have no kills, and it's like, bro, it's because I was holding space for you, the amount of times I have bailed you guys out. But of course, everyone just looks at the scoreboard. It happens. Mei is the anti-stat padder, and while that's a respectable role to have, unfortunately Stadium does not care for your kind. I find it extremely difficult to really consistently get decent stats on Mei, even when I'm able to win on Mei, and even when I'm able to do a lot of impactful plays. Again, it's almost always about holding angles, making space, or keeping space, not really about getting big game-winning kills or whatever. And here comes the worst part. To be honest, part of me still thought, well, maybe holding space is more important than I give it credit for. I mean, is there anyone else on the DPS role that's really good at holding space? And for a moment I really thought about that, and it's like, I mean, there's a couple, like, Junkrat's kind of good just because he's a threat up close, but he's not really built for that. Like, he's still very easy to kill, and, like, even though he is a threat up close, he's often not sitting in the back line, he's jumping in there. So not really Junkrat. I guess Mei is the best, oh wait. Then I remembered Cassidy existed. And I'm going to be real with you, the more I think about that analogy, that comparison, that if you want to hold space, you can either have a Mei or a Cass, which one do you want? I'm trying to think when the hell you want a Mei. Like, even in those dream comps for Mei, I'm wondering, like, because I've seen it happen. I've seen the Mei Genji, Mei Reaper, like with D.Va or Junker Queen as their tank. I've seen those pop off. I haven't seen so much, like, Cass Genji D.Va or, like, Cass Reaper Queen or whatever. But I am thinking to myself, can I think of any reason why Cass wouldn't work basically equally as good at Mei at doing that job while just being a much better character that gets way more stats and actually gets kills? And to be honest, I kind of think the answer is, I can't think of anything. I think that Cass might literally just do Mei's job but better. I don't know, I guess Mei has more just raw HP, and she has invulnerability frames on her ice block, so I guess if it's a pure health issue, then Mei is better. But oftentimes, it's not really a pure health issue. A lot of the times, it's more about just staying alive, whether that means using cover rather than health, or using stuns to deal with flankers. I do think in most cases, Cass is literally just going to do Mei's job but better. So that was kind of a death nail for Mei. You've got very, very few options for synergies. None of your synergies are all that impressive. You struggle to farm credits. The one thing you do is hold space, and then even then, one of the S- tier characters that also happens to be an impactful hit scan is honestly better at holding space than you are in most contexts. So yeah, I gotta say that Mei is D tier, and the worst character in Stadium right now. Hopefully, she doesn't just get buffed, although buffs would be nice, but rather actually get some changes to some of her powers and items, because I'm really disappointed with a lot of them, to be honest with you. Coming towards the end of the list, we have Reaper. And Reaper is going in S-, even above D.Va. Reaper is better than I gave him credit for. It seems like everyone, in fairness, including me, is having a great awakening now to how good Reaper actually is in Stadium and how much we've underrated him. Of course, you'd think the standard try-hard way to play Reaper is a weapon power build. And don't get me wrong, I think weapon power Reaper is definitely the most safe pick if you want to play a Reaper build and you're like try-harding and trying to climb. You can take an item which allows your headshots to anti-heal, and because the fact it's a shotgun, only one of the multiple pellets needs to headshot to get the anti-heal. And that way, basically everyone you shoot gets 30% anti-heal, which is a big deal. That alongside your lifesteal, your huge damage output, and just how much of a stubborn threat you are to remove, with Wraithform being just invincibility plus mobility on command with cleanse. Reaper is just exactly what you need. You can place him where you need him as a threat. He's really, really good in terms of pure stats and output. His Stadium items only take that further. And yet he gets to do all this while being an extremely stubborn and difficult to remove threat. But it gets better. Lifesteal in Stadium in general is a particularly powerful mechanic. And there's actually two reasons why. For one, there's the obvious, that you get credits both for the damage you deal and the healing that you do. But on top of that, there's the fact that getting healing for dealing damage obviously encourages you to do more damage, and also gives you the resources to enable yourself to play more aggressively to deal more damage. And the more aggressively you play, and the more you lifesteal, the more credits you make. You get to snowball in terms of your money gain really hard if you lean into lifesteal as Reaper. Especially considering that Reaper has a power that allows him to double his lifesteal for 3 seconds when he shadow steps, and yes, I did check, it actually doubles the lifesteal not only of your passive, but also the lifesteal of all the items you buy. So buying more lifesteal gets double power if you take that power. But so far, we're just talking about normal weapon power Reaper. What about the real secret sauce? What do I think is the best way to play Reaper? You're gonna think I'm memeing, and I swear to God I'm not. I am telling you, AP Reaper is unironically so strong. I am not accepting this cope. I am not accepting this propaganda that AP Reaper is a stupid build that isn't good and doesn't work against smart players. I'm sorry, man. I do not buy this garbage. I think you have to play it the right way, but I think when you play it the right way, it is genuinely the strongest DPS build in all of Stadium. Okay, so for those of you out of the loop, Reaper's AP build is considered a meme. But the reason why is because of the fact that his ability power only amplifies the power of Death Blossom and nothing else, which is obviously only your ultimate, which sucks. Obviously, you're going to need something more than that for your AP to be useful. And that's where one of his powers comes in, which allows you to perform a mini Death Blossom that lasts half as long and does half as much damage whenever you Shadow Step. This allows you to do AP-based damage without having to use your ultimate, or at least the real ultimate. And this might seem okay, but there's a lot of problems with this that people identify at first, and make them think that the build is just a new build that's not actually good. First of all, the main thing that makes Death Blossom good is the fact it kills so fast, and it lifesteals so much. Halving the damage both makes it take twice as long to kill, and also makes it so you don't get as much lifesteal, making it so that often, using this in the early game is literally worse than just shooting your shotguns normally. The damage output's going to be pitiful, you're going to be slowed, you're going to be easy to shoot and punish, and it's telegraphed of course, which is just another issue. They can see where you're about to Shadow Step before you appear, and they know you're going to Death Blossom the second you appear, so it's so easy to just stun you out of it and kill you for trying. Combined with the fact that it's only a small AoE, and basically this is the kind of build where a lot of people would argue it's bad, not only because smart players are never going to fall for it, but also because of the fact that you're never actually going to get kills with it until you get off the ground with the build. But that often comes so late that you just can't really do anything. You can't really fix the game by the time you've lost that many rounds, because you've been useless for that many rounds. That's the argument against this build. Now let me tell you why I think all of that is garbage. Alright, first up, remember that power I mentioned where you can double your lifesteal for 3 seconds when you Shadow Step? Yeah, that also applies to the mini Death Blossom. So you can double the lifesteal of the mini Death Blossom to get the lifesteal that it gives you back to the amount of a normal Death Blossom, even if the damage is still the same. That way, you can become so tanky, especially if you buy further lifesteal items that are going to receive the double buff, that when you do mini Death Blossom, even the mini Death Blossoms will make you so much health that you'll basically be unkillable, unless you get stunned out of it. But that's just the other thing. If you get stunned out of it, the second you stand up, you can just Wraith Form and get out. Oh, but what if they have enough burst to actually kill you while you're stunned? They won't. Because you can just very cheaply take Cushion Padding, an item that makes all negative effects, including stuns, last for 40% less time, and even heals you for 10% of your maximum health when you receive a stun. This makes it so that you recover nearly twice as fast from being stunned, and get healed for being stunned, after you've already just lifestealed from your Death Blossom. And again, the second you're out of stun, you can just mash Wraith Form and immediately get on-command invincibility and escape, and there's basically nothing they can do to actually punish you. And sure, people can avoid the Death Blossom pretty easily if they really try, but oftentimes you can pick the Death Blossom in places that the enemies really don't want to give up. You can take space like crazy on Reaper by just Death Blossoming spots, and hell, maybe you don't even get any kills, maybe the enemy's never stupid enough to walk into it. But even if that is the case, if you're able to constantly just completely zone out crucial angles for their ability to take the point by just Death Blossoming them on repeat, then that means that you're going to have some really oppressive map control. And again, no one can punish you. No one can kill you. You're basically unkillable. And the best part is, usually if you are doing this very space-makey kind of playstyle, this playstyle that's more based on survivability and taking space rather than getting kills, usually when all this is the case, you have to live with the fact that you barely get any credits. But that's just the thing. There's the final punch. This build is so good at farming credits. It is insanely good at farming credits. because every single mini Death Blossom is just, your stats shoot through the roof. You farm stats like crazy. You farm damage, you farm heals, people try and shoot you, but your health bar regenerates faster than it could even, like, fall, and that means you're getting credits for people shooting you as well as you shooting them. Your credits skyrocket, and when your credits skyrocket, that means the build can quickly build momentum before you've lost, and get to the point where you just TP on people and they die within 1 second of you appearing, even with the mini Death Blossom, while you have effective invincibility with the ridiculous amount of lifesteal you have. Don't get me wrong, if people give all the attention in the world to you, they can avoid your Death Blossoms. They can basically always do it. But that's just the thing. You're kind of already winning if the entire enemy team has to constantly stop what they're doing every few seconds to deal with your Death Blossoms. Ultimately, as a recap, get the Shadow Step lifesteal power first because of the fact that the mini Death Blossom is going to suck in the early game anyway. So just play normal Reaper with the lifesteal burst for the first 2 rounds, and then you take the Death Blossom power. Once you have that Death Blossom power, you need to start taking lifesteal items and make sure you're getting the double lifesteal value so that you can go for these Death Blossoms without dying. Obviously get some AP in there as well whenever you can, but lifesteal is definitely the most important thing. Use that to farm credits. Don't even worry too much if you're not getting loads of kills, just so long as you're getting a lot of damage and a lot of self-heal done and you're making some space, you're doing your job. And eventually, you should hit the point, and it should be before you lose, that you are making so much money, you can start just taking Champions Kit, all the expensive, massive AP boosts, and get to the point where your mini Death Blossoms may as well be full Death Blossoms, that you just spam every 10 seconds. And oh, did I mention that Reaper has a power that allows him to reset his cooldowns when he gets an elimination? And that means that you can literally Death Blossom on cooldown, just like Death Blossom, kill someone, Death Blossom, kill someone, Death Blossom, kill someone, on repeat, with no punishment and no time gap in between, if you actually get that power and just start going on a killing spree. It is ridiculous. I am telling you, AP Reaper is a demon, and I will not let anyone tell me otherwise. So considering even Weapon Power Reaper would be enough to put him in S-, but I think AP Reaper is unironically better. It just has a meme reputation, but genuinely when you play it well, it is the best way to play Reaper in most circumstances. Yeah, I've got to put him at the top of S-. And finally, there's Soldier, who I must admit I don't have the most to say about, but I think I'm going to put him in A tier. Soldier is good, but like in a boring way. Well, I say that. I suppose one exciting thing about him that is quite unique to him is I would say while most hit scans have really disappointing build diversity, where they're really always a little bit too much like their vanilla selves, Soldier actually has some of the craziest build diversity in all of Stadium. There's some people who go all in on AP so that they can one-shot with rockets. There's some people who go all in on AP so that they can use biotic field builds, where their field actually deals damage and follows them, so they can just run into crowds of enemies and have the AoE damage kill them. There's some soldiers who go for just pure weapon power builds, but then even then, there's different ways they do it. Some soldiers like to go for chain gun builds, where they go with the power that makes them gain more ammo when they sprint, so they can just shoot continuously without having to reload, and the power of their weapon keeps increasing the longer they fire without taking a break. There are a lot of different ways you can approach building Soldier, and all of them have their different strengths and weaknesses. And all of them, for the most part, are also pretty good overall. Like, don't get me wrong, again, strengths and weaknesses, but like, as a whole, averaging it all out, most of them are just pretty damn good. As well as that, Soldier is of course a hit scan, and that is very important, as I keep hammering home. So I guess all there really is left to answer is, why not even better? Why not S-? Why not put him with Cass? Well, don't get me wrong, Soldier can be difficult to dive. If he takes the power where he's able to have a half second of tactical visor when he rockets, that can be very good versus characters like Genji. And as well as that, if he is taking a lot of damage, his biotic field, if you actually invest in AP, actually self-heals so much that he can feel practically unkillable. That being said, there is a bit of an issue here. If you're going to play an AP-based Soldier build, while you still have the ability to apply long-range pressure, of course it's going to be much worse, because that's weapon power. Now, of course, that's because you're going to get power elsewhere, but you really need to invest in AP to be a tough dive target as Soldier. If you're not investing in AP, you're much easier to dive from basically any character in the game that's able to reach the backline. So you kind of have this conundrum with Soldier, where it can be difficult to make a whole lot of space on him without sacrificing your survivability, but if you sacrifice your survivability, then don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you're doing anything bad. You can still have big impact on Soldier, but you can hit this point where you start to feel like a much more vulnerable dive target, and so it does feel like you kind of wish you were just playing Cass. You can still do your job without having to sacrifice survivability that way. Essentially, that's kind of how I view Soldier. A version of Cass that is way more versatile in terms of the different ways you can play them, but each different way, on average, is probably weaker and less, but each individual one of those different versatile playstyles is usually going to be a little bit weaker and less well-rounded than what Cass can provide in an all-in-one package. Again, it's kind of a shame, because I do really like the idea of catering your builds to the team and the maps and blah blah blah, but I do think typically you will get better results out of just picking consistency with Cass, rather than constantly trying to adapt to changing circumstances with Soldier, when anytime you pick a power, it's a permanent lock for the rest of the game. Of course, with items you can get away with more, but I do think that Soldier's powers are very important, and if you realize halfway through a game you'd rather be on a different Soldier build, it is kinda tough to pivot. With all that said, that covers all the DPS for this video. Next video, we'll cover the supports. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.